Hello, my name's Roisin, and these are my favourite light fantasy books. Hello friends, and welcome back to another recommendations video. Today I thought I would talk you through some of my favourite light fantasy books. Light fantasy is kind of a weird, broad term, but what I basically mean when I say light fantasy is books that have an element of the unreal in them, but it's not science-based, it's kind of magical, but it's not so much, there's no world building, the magic's not really explained, it's not got different races and dragons. There might be a dragon. I'm not sure, but nothing's really fully explained or explored in that in-depth detail. It's just a vague sense of magic, often inspired by fairy tales or folklore. I like books that have an element of magic to them, but I don't want anything that's too fantastical and spend so much time on the world that we don't spend as much time with the characters. So I guess you could call some of these magical realism or fabulism, but they're kind of all over the place. Some of these are much more fantastical than others. Others just have a light feeling of magic to them, but there's nothing really explained that's that magical. This is definitely a genre that I want to read more of, so if you have any recommendations for me, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to chat to you about this genre. The first book I have on my list is The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan, which is the story of a world where the water levels have risen and risen until most people live on the sea, except for the landlubbers who live on small islands dotted throughout. Our main characters are a girl who dances with a bear in a travelling circus that is on a ship and goes from island to island performing, and her performance is that she dances with the bear. And then our other main character is a gracekeeper, which means that she performs the funeral rites in this world where there is nowhere to bury anybody, so they are sent off to sea, and people bring their dead bodies to the kind of pontoon island situation where she lives, and she does all of the rites to send the bodies on. And she also has webbed feet, and she kind of is a bit of a mermaid. And this story includes queer love, and it is incredibly beautifully written. It is definitely one that I would call kind of ethereal. The world itself feels like a world that would be described in a fairy tale. It doesn't feel like it's apocalyptic future, sea level rising fiction, although there is that element to it. There's talks of religion, of difference, of grief and of love, and it is an incredibly beautiful and heart-warming, heart-wrenching kind of a novel. The second one on my list is one you've probably all read, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This one is definitely more fantastical than some of the others. It is about a circus that only comes at sunset and closes at sunrise, and it travels around the world. And it is also about two people, a stage magician and a mysterious grey man, who have these competitions, these games, these battles where they choose a person and teach them magic according to their own understanding of magic and then set them up against each other. They're both very strict, but one's about intuitive talent and one's about anyone can be taught magic. And we have this boy and this girl who have been chosen from very small to be these people who are against each other, but they don't know until they end up at the circus building magical tents for one another. It is so beautifully written, one of the most visual books I've ever read. It's one that you can really truly imagine in your head. It's one that doesn't quite make sense, the magic isn't quite clear, but it is definitely very captivating, one that I would like to lose myself in. It is one that feels almost a bit sinister. There's kind of a slight Roald Dahl magic but dark element to it, which I absolutely love. I think the world here is the most brilliant thing about it, even though it's not as strictly built as you would find in a regular fantasy novel. Another one that gets more and more fantastical as you go through is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden, which is a story set in northern Russia in I think the medieval period, before Russia is Russia. Girl who lives with her family in a remote village, and she can see spirits, the spirits that the people of the village pray to, the hearth spirit, the river spirit, but because Christianity is being spread through the country, the old religion clashes with Christianity. When the main character gets a new stepmother who can also see the spirits but is highly Christian, and a new priest comes, there is a clash between their two worlds, and the spirits, the rituals that the people did for these spirits start to slowly diminish, and so the spirits themselves diminish and the darkness can come in, and this girl has to work out a way to save her family. It is again one that is incredibly atmospheric. The world is so well built, it feels really real, even down to the fact that her family sleep on top of the oven, which may have been something that people did in medieval Russia, but definitely feels like such a magical element to me. All of these spirits and everything else just slowly dripped in a way that feels almost dreamlike. It doesn't feel very, this is what happens and this is this. It's not a big world. Feels like it's historical fiction, and slowly the boundaries between folklore and reality are faded away until everything bleeds together, which is exactly the sort of fantasy that I love. Number 4 is definitely much more fantastical, and that is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Katherine M. Valente. This is one about a girl who gets ravished or taken by the fairies into Fairyland, and so there is a whole world there. Feel less intense or intimidating than high fantasy is that although it's gone to this other world, it's based around folklore or fairy tales that we would know, and it is also based on kind of wordplay. Like it's a very clever book, very cleverly written, and all of the magic is kind of based on wordplay and what things mean, kind of in the vein of The Phantom Tollbooth. It is also a middle grade novel, and so I think that in middle grade fantasy and stuff can happen with a lot more whimsy and a lot less focus on like politics or a lot less attention to detail, which sounds like it's a thing that you would want, but when there is fantasy, I just want it to wash over me. I don't really want to be bogged down in the details of it. And I think that the whimsy and the heart of this story definitely helped to bring it along. It feels so magical and so much like an old fairy tale. Number 5 is the exact opposite of the light and whimsical The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, and is Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. This is an incredibly heart-wrenching novel. It is split between two timelines about a Jewish man from New York who goes back to Ukraine to learn more about his family, and he's called Jonathan Safran Foer, and he goes back to Ukraine to find out about his family and meets this tour guide who takes him around. And then we also flash back to the Second World War and the Nazis coming into this Jewish village and what happened there. Jonathan Safran Foer is a very experimental writer, and the form of his novels is part of the reason for reading them. The structure and the way that things are written is not straightforward or standard, but I love that about it. The way that he uses blank space and structure to draw you into the story and also to have an emotional impact. Everything that he does with the form of the novel has an important part to play in the story. This novel is semi-autobiographical, based on the stories of Jonathan Safran Foer's grandfather and the shtetl, which was destroyed in Ukraine, and also of his own going back to visit that place and learn more about his family's history. The fabulous elements of this book help to serve to reinforce the unreality of the cruelty that happened at that time period. Another book that is only lightly magical but a lot more light-hearted than Everything is Illuminated is Chocolat by Joanne Harris. This is a book set just after the Second World War in France, about a village where a mother and daughter who are travellers come into the village and set up a chocolate shop during Lent. This village is run by a very Catholic mayor, and they're all Catholic, but they come to the chocolate shop where they're not supposed to be going during Lent and meet this woman who has the power to tell you what your favourite chocolate is just by talking to you. She knows everything about people, and she helps the village to open up and to throw off the rigidity and the fear. She helps to free people from the structures of the society in which they live, which keep them stifled. For example, a woman who has an abusive husband, but she is fought against by the mayor, and also she meets other travellers and involves them in the life of the village as well, although the people of the town are prejudiced against these travellers. It is a book that is so incredibly beautifully written, and one of those books that makes you hungry. It makes you desperate for chocolate. The descriptions of the chocolate are so incredible, and also the food and passion and understanding of people opening up through food has strong reminiscences of magical realism from Latin America, and like Water for Chocolate, there is a sort of element of that in this book too. It is a heart-wrenching book. It is definitely a heart-warming book at the same time. It is sort of a cozy Sunday afternoon book if you like a book that will make you have a little cry. Another book that will make you have a little cry is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which won the Women's Prize for Fiction this year. This is the story of Hamnet, the 11-year-old son of William Shakespeare who died, and it is about, although that is the centre of the novel, the nugget around which it is built, it begins with it tells the story of their life, and Hamnet dies in the middle, and then it is also their grief, but there are also flashes back to his father William Shakespeare meeting his mother Agnes, or Anne Hathaway. It is a story about what it was like to grow up in a sort of middle class family in Tudor times, which I think is really well done. The atmosphere is grabbed really well. It is also the story of a plague, which may be difficult to read in this time period, although I found the way the plague moved really interesting, that it had come from Asia through Italy and up into England. Just seemed the trade routes that moved the plague seem not to have changed that much in the past 400 years. Agnes is our main character, and she is a healer, and she also has the power when she touches people or things to have seen where they have been from, and to understand their history and their future by touching their hands. And so that is kind of the magical element of this book, but it is not a very strong element. Most of it is about this family, and it's very real and grounded in that. And it is about grief and death, and so it is incredibly moving. Next, another one that I've talked about a lot on this channel is the Mermaid and Mrs Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gowar. So this one is magical, clearly, because there is a mermaid in the title, although don't go into it expecting Peter Pan style mermaids. I think I've read a lot of the reviews for this when I did a video reading the reviews of my favourite books, which I will leave in the cards above, and people got very upset that there weren't real mermaids in it, but there is magic. There is an element of magic, and that it is fabulous in the way that the magic is a metaphor or a way to further explore the emotions of the humans involved. Mermaid and Mrs Hancock is about a tradesman, Mr Hancock, whose captain of a ship comes back with a mermaid, which is just a curiosity. This is set in the 18th century, and curiosities were common then. People were travelling far and wide and bringing back things that people had never seen before, some which were real, some which were crafted to make people believe that the world was more mysterious than it was. And then our other main character, Angelica, is a courtesan who has recently lost her sugar daddy, and has to go back to the boarding house where she started. So it's quite a raunchy book. There is quite a lot of sex in it, but it is also really, really good at historical feeling. You feel very immersed in the 18th century. It feels really visceral and real, and it doesn't shy away from the gross aspects of the past. It certainly doesn't sanitize everything, but at the same time it feels so warm and welcoming and inviting. It is a good fun romp of a novel with a very deep emotional underpinning to that. Number 9 is a collection of short stories, which is Escape Routes by Naomi Ishiguro. This is her first collection of short stories, and they are all speculative, fabulous, magical stories. There is one about a boy who creates infinity in his Erin cupboard, and a collection of 3 stories about a rat catcher in a magical land. It doesn't feel modern, but it also doesn't specify what time. It's that sort of fairy tale era that it happens in, which was incredibly funny and also really well described, really engaging, really beautiful, but creepy at the same time. It gave me very Gormenghast vibes, if you've read that book, and I really thought that they were very well done. There were a couple that didn't quite stand up for me, but that always happens in a short story collection. And then finally, another book that is one that feels like an old fairy tale, and that is Stardust by Neil Gaiman, which tells the story of a boy from a town called Wall, where there is a wall that is supposed to separate this world from another world, a world where there are witches and magic, and one day a falling star lands in this other world, and he crosses over the wall to get some of the star for the girl that he loves, who doesn't really care about him. And it is the story of him meeting this star, who is actually a person in this other world, and all of the people that they run into, all of the magic. It is so whimsical and fun and funny and silly. It harps on themes of fairy tales, which is one of the things that you can tell from this list that I absolutely love in books. This book reminds me probably most, it's like a grown-up version of The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a ship of her own making, but it is also one that would be appropriate, I think, for some children. I'm not sure, I can't remember the last time I read it, but it is so funny and so light-hearted, and the film is also really, really good. I would recommend that too. So that is my top 10 light fantasy books. I hope you found some here to spark your interest. If there are any light fantasy books that you love, please leave them in the comments below, because I would love to have some more recommendations for me. You guys did such a good job on my video of books set in isolated places, which I will again leave in the cards. You gave me so many recommendations recommendations and I absolutely loved it. So if you could do that again, that I would really, really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and to subscribe, because I put out new videos every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. And so I will see you again soon. Bye bye!